All right, guys, today we're going to be talking to another one of our teammates here at Sunset Solutions. She's one of our newer teammates, super hardworking individual. She's an IT phenom, I think I can say that. She's helped me with a number of issues already since she's been here. She's really a joy to work with.
Yeah, she's in our program we call Discover, and so she's joined us for a year. She's actually 19 years old, and it's just an amazing blessing to have somebody her age, loving the Lord, serving the Lord here in missions. We're talking about Breck Connolly. My name is Mike Tapia.
And I'm Cody Hall.
And this is the Go and Send podcast. All right. Well, it's great to be here with you, Breck. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to talking a little bit with you. Excited to have you on the Sunset Solutions team and that you're here in this ministry and plugging right in. What is it that you are doing right now at Sunset? Like, what is your role?
So I am working in the IT office. So around the office, I'm doing a lot of the help desk stuff. Someone puts in a ticket to, like, their computer's not working all of a sudden. I'm usually the one that goes and fixes it. A lot of the projects that Dan has, like, in the plan of things, he's having me scope out and see what needs to be done and getting everything in order for that so we can just go when he's ready. And then also, like, today I've been moving around a lot of people's desks with all this construction and stuff. I've been moving people's computers around. So
that is important stuff. Yeah, it's really cool when you think about it. Like, IT is such a big need in the world today. Mm-hmm. Everyone, every company, every organization has some kind of needs with IT. But you can take that and apply that in missions and mission organizations, and the need is there. Mm-hmm. And to have somebody with your skill set plugging in, it's really cool. It's a blessing to have you. It's super huge to just keep a ministry operating. So.
Oh yeah, yeah,
exactly. It's fundamental, and it's the behind the scenes stuff that a lot of times doesn't get a lot of airtime, but it's so crucial because every partner that we serve, at Sunset and the solutions we provide, IT underpins all that work. Mm-hmm. It's crucial. Yeah. It's crucial. Yeah.
What do you enjoy the most about IT? You kind of have that technical brain. Is there a certain area that just kind of excites you?
So this is a little bit different than most IT people that you're going to talk to. I love doing help desk. A lot of people don't like doing help desk because there's a lot of teaching your users how to do things or seemingly simple issues to you that are work stop issues for others. I went into IT because I'm good at working with computers and I like helping people, and IT and specifically help desk was the perfect intersection. So help desk has always been my favorite part of it.
That's awesome. You're really good at it too. I know there's multiple times already that I've come to your desk and I said, Breck, can you look at this thing on my computer or something weird? And I feel within 2 minutes you figure it out. It's thank you, Breck. This is
exactly.
awesome.
You took the words right out of my mouth. She's already helped me a number of times with issues.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's an area God's gifted me in, and I'm really happy to be able to use it to let people keep working.
And I think your heart's coming out there too because you have a heart for teaching people. So it's not just I'm going to fix your problem, begrudgingly. No, it's I'm going to fix your problem with joy, and I'm going to teach you, here's how you can avoid this in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's my whole thing. I want to make sure that people know what happened so that they can avoid doing it again.
Yeah.
Because I know how annoying it is for people for these tech issues to be coming up. And it's easy for me, but it's not easy for other people. And I totally understand that.
Yeah. So you talked about, that's the help desk part. Mm-hmm. You're also doing some infrastructure related stuff, working here on the building. You talked about the project or the construction project. What's going on with that?
So we just had the West End renovated. So there were a bunch of offices, or a few offices put in, and today particularly I've been moving people into those new offices, but throughout all of the construction, one of the things that I did, probably one of my favorite projects that I've worked on here, is we ran network cables through all the walled in offices and stuff like that, added a few ports and stuff like that. That's something that was really fun, and if I didn't like help desk as much as I do, network engineering is what that's called. Network engineering is something that I would have gone into. But that was super fun to get to run the network cables and all that stuff.
That's neat.
Yeah.
It's crucial too.
Oh, yeah.
So, Breck, it's so cool to have you here. How old are you again?
I'm 19.
19.
Yeah.
And so it's just like so encouraging to have you here on the team and and just seeing the way the Lord's gifted you. Just even talking about that, I feel like you're a natural genius. That really is really neat to have
I was
you
thinking
here.
like IT phenom.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But how do you get to this point? Like you've made this decision to come here and join us for a year in ministry. Could you tell a little bit about your upbringing? Maybe did you have any experiences in ministry? What was kind of like formative for you in your views of ministry?
So I grew up in a Christian family. I was always like in a church all growing up. And I was very lucky. The church that I was in, basically any church that I was in from the age of 12 onwards, I always had a chance to serve in some way. I've never not done something musical in a church. So like since I was like little, I've been like singing in choir. I've been helping out with the children's plays. I ran a worship team at one point. I've been able to serve a lot in my church growing up. My parents have always been very encouraging of it. They never pressured us into anything, but they were always encouraging if we wanted to serve in some way. Facilitated that, brought us early or something like that if we needed. So yeah, I grew up in the church. I also had a lot of people speaking into my life biblically. Like I grew up in Awana. I grew up in youth group. I had some good mentors there that really encouraged me to explore how I can use the gifts that God gave me.
Yeah.
Like one major thing that brought me to this point, before I even met the couple at Sunset that introduced me to this organization, there was, I was at church in New Hampshire one morning, and we were having our missions focus Sunday, and we had the head of a missions board called IBM Global talking at our church because his family attended the church. And one of the things that he said was that missions needs all sorts of different people, not just people going out overseas and teaching and setting up churches, but they need people in office work supporting missionaries. And right then I kind of had the switch flip where I'm like, I want to do, like, I'm already about to finish school at this point. Like, I'm 15, I'm sitting there, I'm getting ready to graduate. No, I would have been 16 at that point. I'm 16, I'm sitting there getting ready to graduate in May. And this is March, I think, at this point. And I didn't know what I was going to do with my IT skills that I'm going to come out of college with. And he says that, and I'm like, I want to use IT in ministry in some way. I don't know what ministry. So I went up and I talked to him, and I was going to start an internship at that missions board doing IT. But God moved my family to Ohio instead. So my family was kind of supportive with doing the whole internship thing. They're like, well, you can get experience doing it, whatnot. Then I go to Ohio. I go to my church in Ohio about a year and a half later, and we have a missions focus Sunday where there's a missions conference, and a couple at Sunset, John and Jean Anderson, were there, and they were sharing about their mission, and the pastor that was leading that panel asked them a question, and that question was, other than money, what is the biggest need in your ministry right now? And they said people, specifically, like, they had been talking about engineering and software development needs, but they said specifically people in like the office and administrative roles, which is what IT falls in under. And that kind of was like, the thing that I was looking for. At that point, I was working an industry job. I was working for what's called an MSP. So I was doing IT for 50 different small companies with this company I was employed by.
Cool.
And I was kind of feeling dissatisfied in that place. I'd learned a lot, but I wanted to use my IT to serve God in some way, and I wasn't sure how to do that. So as soon as I heard John and Jean say that, I'm like, wow, I need to go talk to them about this. So I go after the service, I talk to them, and I ask John, I'm like, do you guys need IT help? And he's like, yeah, that's a huge need for us right now. Like, we have one guy, we'd love to have someone else. We are actively looking for an IT person. So I'm 17 at that time.
Wow.
And then we start the process. I come out, I visit. And then when I'm telling my parents about this, my mom was like, oh, as soon as I heard about them, I knew that this would be a fit for you.
Wow.
So my mom was like in full support.
That's really encouraging too, to have that, right? It's like, it's so cool, like hearing like the way you're like, there's just so much to unpack right there.
Oh yeah, there's
like,
a ton.
Just all these steps that the Lord has like put in your life too, and like leading you through this, because you think about it and it's like, it's not, your story didn't all happen at once, like a lightning bolt hit you. It's like, I'm going to ministry. It's like, it was these steps that the Lord kind of had in your life.
Yeah.
Even going back as far as like your parents were supportive of you getting involved in things.
Yeah.
And just that idea of serving. And then this right guy comes along at the church and introduces the concept, hey, there's diversity in the body of Christ and in missions, and then all the way to John and Jean Anderson. So it's really cool to see how the Lord kind of put those. Yeah. So how did your parents like support you getting involved in things at like a young age? Like how did that happen with, like, you said you got involved in like serving different areas before you even started thinking about missions?
Yeah.
How did that kind of take place?
So when I was like little, like I'm talking before the age of like 6, I was expressing interest in learning musical things, stuff like that. And my church at the time had a choir, so my parents would bring us to all the choir practices and stuff like that. So that was like my first taste of doing something in the church. And then also that church, they did plays for holidays, not just children's plays, but like actual production plays for holidays.
Oh, cool.
And that was another area that I was interested in, like helping out. So my mom would make sure that I was able to get to practices and help me learn my lines, stuff like that. So I kind of had that little taste of helping out in church or doing things in church from like, this was before we moved to Pennsylvania, which was before I was 6. So
wow.
Yeah. Then in Pennsylvania, my family would make sure that we were able to come for the Christmas plays that the children did, bring us to all the rehearsals, stuff like that. As I got older, I wanted to use my musical skills in church more, and like doing some special songs for the church service. So my mom would take me to this lady at the church, take me to her house so that we could practice together. She taught me some things there. So my mom facilitated that, and my dad was behind that. Got to do a couple piano special music at the church. When I got older, I was helping out with Awana, because Awana at that church only went up to about 12. Well, yeah, Awana only goes up to about 12.
Okay, yeah. I kind of remember that
ch-
from Awana days.
Yeah, and that church didn't have a youth group. So afterwards, I was helping out with Cubbies, and my mom made sure that I was able to be there, help out how I needed to there. A lot of it was just, we expressed an interest in helping out in some way. Like, this goes for me and my siblings. We expressed an interest in wanting to help out in church some way, and my parents made sure we were there, reminded us of it, and just encouraged us that if we wanted to be active in some way in the church in some way, that we could.
Yeah.
That they would make sure that we had the resources to do so.
It's like there are several themes there that jump out. Like, I think one of them is how from a young age God was working on your heart, to serve and to serve the church in some ways, in the unique ways that He had gifted you. Have you ever had maybe some pushback from people who maybe you served alongside of or were leaders or something talking, like, because you graduated high school at what, 15, you said?
16.
16. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. So you were like super, mature for your age, obviously, and working really hard. So like
Yeah.
hard worker. Did you have pushback from people saying like, you're a little young for this or that, or shouldn't you wait a little bit? Or did anybody push back on that? How'd you respond to that?
Yeah, if we're talking before my call to working here at Sunset, no, actually. I don't really have any, not that stuck out, at least. Not that stuck out enough to remember 3 years later. But, no, I've never really had anyone pushing back of like, oh, you're too young for this. In fact, I've had a lot of people, a lot of my mentors, a lot of the people that kind of helped me get involved in church and serving, there was this verse that they always would remind me of, and that's kind of been my life motto verse, is 1 Timothy 4:12. Do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in life and faith and truth and love and in purity.
Awesome.
And
excellent.
that verse has kind of been what's carried me through all these years, like serving, helping out in church, everything like that. It's like serving God doesn't have an age limit. Like you don't have to be this old to be able to start serving. You can, maybe there are some opportunities that aren't available to you, but there are plenty that are wherever you're at.
Yes.
And that's something that's really been drilled into me my entire life, basically.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah, that's
like
good.
awesome. Yeah, it makes me think too. Like, the Lord really placed some really amazing people in your life to help you in navigating some of these
Oh, yeah.
things. And you even mentioned like you had some mentors that helped you through that process, and like were giving you like, how did that come about too? Because I feel like a lot of young people today, they would like a mentor, but it's kind of maybe they don't know how do they get to. Do mentors just approach them? Should they approach a mentor? Like, or how does that even work? Or how did that work for you? Because I think a lot of people would be like, I would love a good spiritual mentor in my life.
Yeah, so for me it was like a little weird. I didn't realize like exactly what it was until probably about a year ago. I realized just what that relationship with some of these people in my life actually had been. But a lot of it was just, I was getting involved in my church, and I had these older people coming alongside me and giving me guidance spiritually, being there to listen when I needed help, giving me wisdom, giving me verses to turn to, and just someone who's very much walking with the Lord, just speaking into my life in different ways. And I've had a few of those over the years. When I was younger, it was Awana leaders. When I was in New Hampshire, it was my small group mentor and my youth pastor there. When I was in Ohio, it was one or two of the youth group mentors. Even after I was out of youth group, they were still speaking into my life, helping me a lot spiritually. And then also getting involved in Bible studies. There's one, I love her so dearly, who I keep in contact with, and she's been a mentor basically since I joined the ladies' Bible study at my church in Ohio. But a lot of it is just not being afraid to get involved and connected to different groups in the church. Because to me, community in a church has always been a very important thing. Whether I like it or not, I'm a very social person, and humans are very social creatures. We learn a lot from being in close proximity with people who are older and wiser and have much more life experience than we do. And you can't be afraid of that. Like the ladies' Bible study that I was a part of was mostly retired folks, and I was in there, an 18-year-old in that Bible study, and I was learning so much from them. And like I know a lot of people my age are like, they want to be around people their age, and I think it's really important to not limit yourself to an age group that you're hanging out with or that you're spending time around, especially in church, because that's where I've gotten so much mentorship and so much spiritual guidance in my life has just been those situations where I'm joining together with a group of believers. Doesn't matter the age, how long they've been a Christian or anything like that. It's so valuable.
And I can say, since you've been here, we've had some conversations.
Yeah.
And that you've been living that out. Because, I mean, you got plugged into a couple of different small groups at a couple churches here. Mm-hmm. I know that's something that's near and dear to your heart, and it's contributing significantly to your growth and maturity. Yeah, I know in my own life, times of growth have been when I've been mentored by older, wiser guys, who led me through Bible studies, prayed with me, were there to answer questions. Yeah.
What did it actually look like? Did you have somebody who sat down with you like on a regular interval, or is it kind of just these people in your life that were just in Bible studies and in church? Did you have anybody who maybe like took an intentional time to get coffee with you or share something with you?
Yeah, I've never had like that formal mentorship where you meet once a month or every couple weeks or something like that over a coffee, going through a book together or something like that. A lot of it has just been I'm connected with these spiritual mentors or with these more spiritually mature people in my life, and they're people that I could go to for advice or for wisdom. They're people leading Bible studies, leading small groups and youth group. A couple of them I have like gone out for coffee with and talked about life and gotten some mentorship there. But it's never been like a formal mentor-mentee relationship, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Yeah, and there's so much value to be gained from that too. Just like you said, like I think that's even, convicting to me too. Like, being in churches where you're hanging out in, going to, a lot of churches have like, this is the young adult class, this is the, the high school class, this is the, the retired people's class, and they kind of segment in some interesting ways. But it's like maybe it's valuable to be like, let me join with some of these men and women who have a little more life experience in a Sunday school, although it's also always valuable to be a part of a peer group too. But I like how you took that step to be in some of these groups with women that were maybe a little more experienced than you.
I really like life groups too, where it's just like these families gathering together for maybe a meal and then a devotion, just families gathering together. That's always also been huge for me. Like I've somewhat recently got connected to one here outside of just the young adult groups that I attend, and that's been so amazing as well. So
nice.
Yeah.
And usually education is a big component, right, of someone's upbringing, and formative, obviously, very formative. Tell us about growing up. I mean, what was your education like? Were you, public school, private school, homeschool? Like, how did that all go? And then maybe how did it lead into the technical area that you ended up getting training in and serving in now?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled my entire life, actually. Part of it was because my mom doesn't like how science is taught in public schools. Part of it was also I started reading at the age of 3.
Whoa. Again, I told you, genius. We're here with the genius.
So I started reading really early, and my mom didn't want me to be held back. So my mom, I love her to bits for doing this. She always was very intentional with me and my siblings are still homeschooled. With me and my siblings finding curriculums that work with how we learn. And that was so important for helping me explore different interests I have. Like, I was able to explore, like, I have musical hobbies, I have artistic hobbies, I have technical hobbies. And I was able to explore all of those while still as a part of my education. I'm very grateful for how she did that. During the homeschool days, like when I was younger, I'm not going to lie, a lot of my technical interest came from conversations with my dad. My dad is a very big tech guy. He really instilled a lot of interest in stuff like that. So some of it came from that, and also some of it came from a lot of misbehaving, believe it or not. I got over it after a little while, but a lot of or a good bit of my technical skills came from I was trying to get around restrictions my mom put in place.
Like a budding hacker.
Yeah,
Like a hacker.
exactly.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I kind of kicked that habit when I was like 11 or 12, but that was kind of what started my interest in, or my realization that this was something like that technical skills was something that I had, that I liked working with computers and stuff like that.
So then earlier you talked about graduating at 16.
Yeah.
What was that? And you had a 2-year degree from Liberty University as well. What went on there?
Yeah, so I did Liberty University's dual enrollment, and they have some associate tracks that give you a associate's degree. And one of their options was in information systems. Not quite the same as information technology, information systems. So when I found out about that, I think I was about, when did I start? 9th grade. I think I was about 12 when I found out about that. 11 or 12 when I found out about that. Yeah, 11 or 12 when I found out about that. And my mom found it and she's like, hey, are you interested in this? I was like, yes, please. Because I've never been, believe it or not, I've never been a huge school person. I don't like school. So I saw that and I'm like, wow, my last 2 years of high school get to be doing a technical degree and I'm out of school early. So I went ahead and I did that. So I graduated in May of 22 with my associate's degree in information systems and my high school diploma at the same time.
Nice. You know, one thing that I've always kind of observed, like with school, is you get a lot of head knowledge and you know a lot of like maybe concepts, but then it takes a bit to like learn practical, like how do I do this?
Yep.
But something I've observed about you, Breck, is you kind of have a lot of that practical. Like, how did you do a lot of projects? Did you like figure things out, or is it like this past job you had before? Like, where did you get so much like practical, hands-on knowledge?
Yeah, so for me, I got a lot of my knowledge from that previous job. I was very lucky. I posted on a Facebook site right before I graduated. I'm like, hey, I'm about to be graduated. I'm 16. What should I do? Are people gonna like not hire me because of my age or what? This is my current degree that I'm about to graduate with. And then I had someone message me and he's like, I own an IT company in Boston. Shoot me a message. That turned into a couple rounds of interviews, which turned into a 6-month apprenticeship, basically, where I was on a help desk role, learning a lot, helping out the clients. And then that turned into a full-time job for almost a year and a half.
Well,
Actually, I think it was a year and 3 quarters that I was working with them. And that was such valuable experience. I learned things so fast there. I got to explore a few different areas. That's where a lot of my practical knowledge comes from. What I mentioned earlier with information systems being different than information technology. Information systems is more back end of things more than information technology being the hardware and practical side of things. So I had some practical knowledge from school, but the majority came from that job working at an MSP.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And you were actually able to do that remotely then? You were remotely
Yes.
working in Boston, but in Ohio.
Yeah. Yep.
So-
I was working from home,
Cool.
taking calls, fixing people's computers. So,
Very cool.
yeah.
While you're doing that, I know that you were pretty involved in your church. And so you're working, you're doing school. You also take the time to be involved in your local church ministries
Yeah.
and kind of plugging in there. What's some of the experience you had working in the local church, maybe opportunities you had to do that? I think you've mentioned a few already, but maybe elaborate a little on those. I think you were doing things in your worship team and things like that.
So the major thing for me, I've done some like volunteering, helping with some side things or like events at church or something like that. But like the major role that I've had that's really defined my desire to serve in church was I was part of my youth group worship team for 3 or 4 years. No, 3 years. 3 years. In New Hampshire, I joined the worship team and I was singing on the worship team. And this was the last year before the current worship team leader was going to graduate high school. She was going to go off to college. So she was training someone up to take her place to run the worship team. Mm-hmm. And so she was training me and my sister. Right before we would have taken over, we find out that we're moving to Ohio.
Oh wow! Like, so how old were you at that church then?
This was when I was 16.
You're 16 there.
Yes.
And now you're getting ready to move to Ohio.
Yes.
Okay.
So this was my final year of school. Again, I'm find out in May that we're moving to Ohio, and then we move the end of June. We move the end of June. We come to Ohio. We find a new church. It has a youth group. And I noticed that something that the youth group lacks is a worship team. And I remembered just how influential that was in my life to have the worship team kind of singing to like set the mood, set the tone of the lesson. So I approached my youth pastor at that church and I asked him, with one of the mentors of a small group at the time, my small group mentor at the time, I approached the youth pastor with her. I'm like, hey, I would like to start a worship team. Would you be okay with that? I can do everything. I can recruit the people. I can run it. I just need your approval, obviously. And he's like, if you run it and just send everything for approval by me, I am so down for that. We've had people try to set up a worship team before, and it's fallen apart after like a month or two.
And how new are you in this church when you take that step too?
We started going to the church, I think, the end of July, and this is October when I'm bringing this up.
Wow.
So this is very early on.
Yeah.
Like I've been a huge proponent of like, especially in my own life, is like, if I feel like this is the church that God has me at, I will start looking for ways to serve. And that's kind of an indicator for me, is like, do I have a place to serve in this church? If I don't, then it's usually not a church that I feel at home at anyways.
Yeah.
But it's something God's blessed me with that. So yeah, this is in October. This is a couple months after we've started going to this church, 2 or 3 months after we started going to this church. I come up to the pastor. I ask him to start the worship team. He gives us the okay. So me and my sister start this worship team, and I led it for 2 years. And then this past year, my sister has been running it, and she's getting ready to hand it off to someone else, obviously, as she's going to college. But it's been super cool to be able to start that and run that and be a servant to my youth group, even before, like, I eventually was a mentor in that youth group, but even before that, while I was still a student in the youth group, I was able to serve the youth group in that way, and it was really cool.
So then it was those 2 years that you were working at you said MPS? That was the remote job.
MSP, yeah.
MSP,
MSP,
the remote job. And then it was at that church that you met John and Jean.
Yes.
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 Well, tell us about that, maybe that particular day when you met John and Jean. I know you touched on it earlier, but how did you discover, okay, they have a Discover program at Sunset?
So that all took place over much longer than just that morning. So that morning I already talked about it a little bit. We have a missions conference that John and Jean are talking on a panel where a few missionaries that my church supported are being interviewed. And my youth pastor is asking them all the questions. Like I said earlier, my youth pastor asked them, what's the greatest need in your mission? And they say, office and administrative workers. And then they have their booth set up in the commons, is what we called it, the foyer area. So I go up and I talk to them between the services, because that was kind of like our Sunday school service. And then right before going into our main service, we had about half an hour of time where we could sit and talk with the missionaries or with each other. So I go to their booth and I talk to them. And I start talking to Jean about the ministry, actually. And as I'm hearing it, I'm like, more and more, I'm like, man, I really feel like I could use my skills here. I really feel like this would be a good place to use my skills.
Yeah.
And then when I ask about IT specifically, she's like, John would know more about that. So I talk with John and I ask him, like, do you guys have a need for IT workers? And he's like, yeah, that would be a huge help. We are actively looking for people to fill our current IT role. So I think about it for a couple weeks, and then I talk to my youth pastor, and I'm like, hey, you remember those 2 missionaries, John and Jean Anderson, that came by? I think, like, is there any way you could put me in contact with them? Because I want to explore this further. So my youth pastor puts me in contact with them, gives them a recommendation, and I talked to them April 6th. I set up a visit on April 16th of 2023. I come and I visit Sunset's office for the first time. I meet you two, actually, on my first visit. I was still 17 at the time, however, so I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't do anything with that visit at the time. I talked to Erica Simone a little bit about it, and I talked to John and Jean, and they're like, yeah, well, we have this Discover program that's this 1-year program. You come, see, are you a good fit? Is this where God's leading you? All that fun stuff. But like I said, I'm 17. I can't do anything with this information yet. So I go home and I sit and I think about it and I pray and I feel like I feel like God's telling me not yet. And I talked to John about it, and he's like, yeah, that's also the feeling that I was getting when I was praying about it. So we'll revisit this whenever this comes up. And at the time, I'm thinking like 3 to 5 years. I'm really? Like, this is kind of like a 3 to 5 year thing is what this kind of feels like. So I go back, I'm working my industry job, and I talk. I'm trying to think back. And then in September of 2023, I just turned 18 a couple months ago. I'm looking at moving out. I have a boyfriend that goes to Liberty, and I'm looking at apartments down there to try and see if I can move out, move to Lynchburg. But God kind of slammed a few doors in my face when I went down there. Apartment tours fell through and stuff like that,
really? Yeah.
and I couldn't schedule anything else, so it felt like a very resounding, you are not supposed to be here. No matter how much you want, this is not where you're going to.
Yeah.
So I go home, I feel the Lord leading me, and it's like, I feel like you're gonna travel. I feel the Lord leading me, telling me you're gonna travel a lot in the next few months. And I'm not sure what that means at the time. I'm just like, oh, okay, so I'm just gonna work remotely and travel and stuff like that for a while. No, it gets to October, about halfway through October. My youth group is looking at doing Operation Christmas Child again. And we have a missionary from Samaritan's Purse come to the youth group and talk about it. And talk about Samaritan's Purse. And I am struck in the car on the way home with a very powerful feeling of, I need to talk to John. I need to send John an email tonight.
Wow.
And so I'm like, hang on, back up a second. What is this? So I go home and I'm praying like for a couple hours that night. And it's the only time that I've felt the Holy Spirit leading me so strongly that I literally could not stand. And it was such a resounding like call to ministry.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
it was such a powerful night that I'm almost tearing up thinking about it. So I talked with my mom about it a little bit, and I'm like, Mom, I think that this is what I need to do. And she's like, yeah, I've felt the same way. So I sent an email to John that night. I'm like, hey, I felt a call to start looking at Sunset again. Can you tell me what would be involved with that? He introduces me to to the Discover program again, and I start the process of
And you get into the
application, and now
process.
here I am.
Wow.
You know, one thing is just like super, it's amazing your steps that you took and just how the Lord is guiding you in the process. I think a lot of people, especially younger people, are in positions in life where it's like, what do I do next? Or what is it like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know if God always gives it like super clear, but like as you're taking steps, like certain doors are closing, certain doors are opening.
Yeah.
And you see that in your life. Like you were just kind of taking steps, being kind of proactive. You were like, you know, okay, let me see, is there an apartment in Liberty? Maybe that's where I should go. And let me
Yeah.
just look at these apartments. Let's try to step in an apartment door, and then all of a sudden God's closing those doors.
Yeah.
But you at the point you're making those decisions, you're thinking maybe that's where the Lord's going to have you.
Yeah.
But he's closing those doors, and then all of a sudden he's opening up these doors for Sunset. It's just really neat to see. You know, sometimes
Yeah.
you can't always know exactly where you're going to be. But like as you're following and taking steps, seeking the Lord, truly seeking him and being proactive and taking steps, you know, he's opening up those doors.
Yeah.
And one of the things we like to say is action leads to information. You know, and waiting on the Lord, it's not just an inactive waiting.
No.
There's steps to be taken.
Oh, yeah.
There's
Yeah.
prayer. I mean, you talked about the importance of prayer. It's huge. Being in a constant mindset of
Yeah.
prayer and seeking the Lord. And thank you for your sensitivity to the Lord's leading. That's so encouraging to see.
Another like little takeaway too I take from it is like, you know, John and Jean Anderson, they're career missionaries that are, you know, they serve here at Sunset. But just like a little thing it's convicting to me too. Like, you know, they're there representing at a church doing these things. What opportunities, you know, are there for those in ministry to just encourage people around them that maybe will be considering ministry? Like they had
Yeah.
to take that step to encourage you
Yeah.
too, and be like, hey, Breck, yeah, I think there could be opportunities for you. And it's a conviction to me. It's like, okay, my role, like, you know, I'm at a church, or, you know, and those who are in ministry, it's like, you know, the Lord's also calling us to share and encourage people
Yeah.
and be a part of, you know, guiding and helping people along in there.
Ultimately,
Thoughts
like
on ministry.
mobilizing people
Yeah.
into it. Yeah.
Mobilizing.
In an
Yeah.
encouraging way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, when you say that, I'm thinking of someone that I know that's like actively applying for an internship here, and I'm like helping them be aware of like who to reach out to and stuff like that,
Yeah.
because
That's awesome.
they go to Liberty, but they didn't go to the career fair that we were at Liberty. So I'm like giving them all this information. But
That's great.
that's what I think of when you're saying that.
So, I mean, in your story, you're up to the point now where you felt the clear call from the Lord. You get back in touch with John. What happens at that point?
So I get in touch with John, and John sets up a call. We call. He just kind of wants to make sure that like I'm not using this as a fallback of like certainty of like where I'm gonna be. And I'm like, in my head, that kind of seems a little weird, because at the time I was working a stable, well-paying job, and I'm about to give it up to go into ministry. But it makes sense now that I think about it later on. But it's we set up a time that we're calling. He asked some questions, and he asked like, what kind of led you to think about Sunset again? Like, and I told him about the doors closing and then the powerful call that I felt like the week before. And then he tells me like, well, that's funny you say that, because we've tried to bring some IT people on, but doors keep closing for them. And it's almost like God's been holding that door open for you, for like you've been exploring these other areas, but it's almost like God's kind of been holding that door for you. And it was really cool to hear that. And it's like an affirmation that this is the right step. So after that call, John puts me in touch with Charlie Jacobson, who's our mobilization lead. He gives me the application process and everything like that. I submit my application for hang on, back up. I was not a member of my church at that point, because my dad has always been kind of, every time that we became a member of a church, God pulled us away and moved us to a different state. So he was a little hesitant to become a member of that church, and I had only recently turned 18, so I was like out of my household now, but I could apply to become a member on my own now. So I make that application in November. I'm going through that process in November, and it takes me until December, right before Christmas, to get accepted as a member of my church for all the voting to go through and all that stuff. And you have to be a member of a church or like have a sending church to come work here. Obviously, you're a missionary, you're having a sending church, stuff like that. So in order for my church to be my sending church, I had to be a member according to the missions board. So that's what I did. I went through all due process, do everything decently and in order. So once I get officially accepted as a member of that church, I reach out to Charlie again. But this is the last 2 weeks of December that I'm reaching out to him. Or maybe the last 3 weeks of December. And being here now, at that time of year, I'm seeing that's a very busy time of year. So I completely understand why it took so long for him to get back. But I sent him an email and I'm like, hey, are you still looking for the IT role? And I'm sitting and I'm waiting for 3 or 4 weeks. And I'm going, like, I went to Connecticut to visit my then boyfriend's family for the new year. And I'm sitting and I'm talking with my boyfriend on, I think it was January 4th. And I'm talking with him shortly before I'm going back home. And I'm like, man, I'm really feeling a little discouraged with how long this application is, how long I'm taking to hear this response from Charlie. And we sit and we pray together and we're like, Lord, please, if this is your will for me to be here, please have him answer by the end of the week. I kid you not, 2 hours after we pray that, 2 hours later, I see the email from Charlie saying, yes, we have that role open. And I break down crying on that couch because I'm like, oh, okay, God, I see you. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that step of faith of like, God, I feel like you're leading me here. Please, if you're leading me here, give me the opportunity to apply here. And he did, only after I took that step and prayed about it. I wasn't just sitting around and waiting, actively praying. Again, like you were saying, it's not a passive waiting, it's an active waiting.
Sure.
So I sent in the application, and I get accepted by, I think, the middle of February, I think. So.
Nice.
And then you go through a support raising process.
Yes.
Something kind of a lot of people in missions go through, and it's an exciting time. It's a little bit intimidating if you've never done it before.
Yeah.
What was your mindset going into financial support raising?
Yeah. So a lot of it was trust. That's like my main takeaway from all this entire process, from first meeting John to going all the way through my support raising process, was just trust. Like, I had a mindset going into it that I could feel God leading me here, and I knew that if God was leading me here, he was not going to leave me high and dry. He was going to make sure I was provided for wherever I was going. So the process of support raising was really an interesting and really growth-filled time for me. The first 2 months of this process, I was taking a course on how to effectively support raise and how to have a biblical principle behind support raising.
What was that course? What was that? Do you remember? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Support raising solutions, something. I can't remember exactly what it was.
This is what all of our staff go through, right?
Yeah.
Really is.
So I was talking to David Palmer, was my coach through it.
Yep.
And I was talking to him. I was kind of the first one here that trial ran doing the multi-week course rather than going for the boot camp. So I took that Support Raising Solutions boot camp and spread it over 2 months. And I got a lot out of that.
Nice.
So I had that study, and it was a lot of biblical foundations of support raising, and then a lot of practical steps of how to start. And David Palmer was kind of working through that with me, helping me be prepared and ready so that I would be able to hit the ground running with this. And then that took from the middle of, or sorry, no, okay, so my application got accepted the end of January, middle or end of January. And then I started this course beginning of February. And that went all the way to the end of March. And then April 1st was my first day of support raising. I quit my job and I went to Texas.
Did you tell them I'm quitting my job on April 1st because they might thought it was an April Fool's
Well,
joke
no,
or
it
something?
was March 30th that I
Okay,
left
okay.
my job or something like that. It was the last working day of March that I officially quit. And then April 1st was like the first working day of
Nice.
April. It's just how it fell. But I went down to Texas first. I was support raising with my going and petitioning my family for support first. And God led me to a lot of different people in my church when I got back home from Texas. One of the biggest encouragements of any of it, of any of the support raising process, was one of my first people that I talked with and asked for support. She supports me for just under a third of my total support.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
awesome.
it was amazing, and I had a meeting with her before I went down to Texas, and she had to think about it, pray about it. And when she sent me an email, she's like, I'm gonna support you for this much. I'm like blown away, like genuinely shocked
Yeah.
by it, and it was so encouraging and really helped me like hit the ground running.
Yeah.
Then I went, petitioned my church, my missions board for some support. They're supporting me for a good chunk. And then most of my support comes from people within my church. Mm-hmm. And it was just so encouraging to see the reaction of people that were so important in my spiritual life coming alongside me and supporting me and sending me out to come here. And I had my support raised in just under 3 months.
Wow.
A breaker of records. I think that's several records you've broken for things here at our ministry. So, like, I think the other phrase we've heard people use about support raising is a roller coaster.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
there's up weeks and down weeks.
For
We
sure.
Talked about, okay, there's a really high week, almost a third from one person, just incredible. Thank you, Lord. But then, did you have some low points as well?
I did. Actually, there was one week I took a trip to New Hampshire to do some support raising, or to try to do some support raising. Had this trip planned out. I was going up with my sister because my sister was already going to New Hampshire. And I went up to New Hampshire and I had 2 meetings that I was able to have in the entire week. I'm like, I'm going out. I'm reaching out to people around me, people who are so influential in my life. I'm reaching out to old churches, or like my old church out there. And I keep hearing, no, I can't support you. I don't have time to meet, or things like that. The church told me their missions budget was full, which is something I love to hear, is that they're supporting so many churches that they can't financially support another, or so many missionaries that they can't support another. But it was just so, in the time leading up to the trip, it was a little discouraging, because I'm like, is this trip really going to be worth it? But I went out in faith. I went out anyways. I still talked to a couple of people out there. I didn't get any supporters from my trip up to New Hampshire. But what I did get was a amazingly restful time that I really needed in that time. And I was able to reach out to people in Ohio and get things confirmed. And even though I didn't get any supporters while I was out in New Hampshire, I came back with, I think, 92% of my support committed by that point. So this was the beginning of June that I was on my way back down to Ohio. I petitioned some of my family in Pennsylvania on my way back down. I get another, and I'm at about 95% by the time I get to Ohio. And within a week, I've finished that 5%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. definitely Lord was opening a lot of doors
For
in
sure.
that, and you know, your experience is not always everybody's experience, but
Yeah.
it's really encouraging to hear,
Yeah.
you know, how the Lord did provide, and He does provide, and it's just kind of mind blowing too, just how fast you were able to get all
Yeah.
these things done by God's grace.
I was very grateful for it.
So, you know, coming into like, you know, here you are, you're 19, kind of member of Gen Z. Ministry, missions, what do you kind of feel is the general mindset of ministry among your peers?
Among my peers, it's something that among my Christian peers, it's very encouraged, kind of. I know a lot of friends who are looking to go into ministry positions. My sister is about to go to college for biblical counseling so that she can work in a Christian school.
Yeah.
I have a friend who he wants to work in ministry doing audio engineering or live video or something like that. So doing like church tech or something. And I have another friend who's going to school for ministry related things. And it's really cool to see that like a lot of my peers are very much wanting to serve God in some way. A lot, and I see this a lot like on social media too, of people using social media as a ministry. And I feel like nowadays there's so many ways to serve and so many ways to be in ministry that it's almost like I see far more people asking, how can I serve in ministry, than saying there's no way for me to serve in ministry. A lot more openness to different types of ministry nowadays.
That's excellent.
Very encouraging.
Yeah.
I think ministries need to be aware of that and need to make sure that we're using the platforms that young folks are using
Yeah.
so that we get that content. And that's kind of part of the hope for this podcast, is another vector that people can discover what the Great Commission's about and discover God's heart for the nations and hear stories about how God is calling others into the ministry and into the accomplishment of the Great Commission. Yeah. I think there's a lot of lessons there to be learned from that, and
For sure.
organizations putting that stuff out there.
Oh yeah.
So what would you say, you know, you talk about the skills that you have, you get to use those skills obviously in a supportive role here, and really a role that contributes to the success of every single employee. How do you see that impact, you know, eternal impact, coming to fruition through the use of your skills here at Sunset?
The major thing for me is I know that the work that the people around me are doing is helping, maybe not directly, but it's helping lead people to Christ. Like you with your Power Solutions stuff, sending out the solar ministry toolkits to different ministries, you with the well pump monitors, sending those out to different ministries, knowing that I'm making sure that you guys are able to effectively do your jobs and send out this equipment to different ministries and minimize any interruption that may delay processes or anything like that. That's huge for me to know, like, I am making sure that the ministry keeps going. I'm making sure that the people in the office are able to keep sending out the equipment that is helping to lead people to Christ. And that's really what it is for me, is that's what drives me. That's how I see the eternal impact, is like I'm making sure that others have the resources to be able to do their jobs effectively, and that the Lord can use them to lead others to Christ.
Yeah, and there's another aspect to the Discover program. You know, it's not just the support raising, but we try to get every Discover participant out into the field at least once. And you're anticipating a trip this year at some point, right? Can you tell us a little about that? I know it's still in the planning phases, but what would you expect to be doing?
So one thing, John actually was talking to me about this morning. We're still very much in the planning phase of it, but there's a couple trips that he knows of that are going to be going on. One is to Africa and one is to Papua New Guinea, that my skills could potentially be used in. And also I am hopefully going to be trained as a videographer to go along as a dedicated videographer on these trips. So I'm anticipating early-ish next year, I think, going to one of those two places.
Great.
For that to be my overseas trip.
Yeah. I just think about the importance of videography and getting those photos and videos, really, because it's really storytelling. It's trying to communicate the impact that the partners we serve with are having on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And how God's using their ministries and the solutions we provide to change lives
Yep.
right where they're serving. Yeah.
You know, when you think about an international trip, I think, have you gone on any international trips before?
Oh, I've never been out of the country.
So you've never been out of the country. Like, how does that, like, strike you, like, in the like, does that make you feel nervous? Does that make you feel excited, or maybe both? Or how do you view that? And how do you view, like, risk and things like that come into play?
It makes me very excited. I've never been one to be averse to travel. Maybe it's the way I was raised. I grew up in 4 or 5 different states growing up, so I'm very well acquainted with having to travel all over. And it's something that, like, when I heard that that's part of Discover, it was like, oh man, I get to do that. I get to go overseas and see the impact that God's having throughout the world. Like, that's huge. It's really exciting for me.
That's cool. That's cool perspective. And, you know, there's always, like, a little bit of, you know, concern and things like that could happen, but it's like, put your trust in the Lord and take the
Exactly.
needed steps for organizing things like that, but trusting the Lord too.
Exactly.
In some of those steps.
Exactly.
So, Breck, it's, like, amazing talking to you and hearing your perspective. You know, if somebody comes to you and kind of asks, Breck, I'm thinking about ministry, like, what kind of advice would you give them? Like, how would you, what direction would you point them in? What would you talk to them about if they're thinking about ministry?
So my first and, like, most important thing is, have you prayed about it? Because you can kind of have this personal desire to want to be doing work in ministry, but if it's not for the Lord, it's gonna be fruitless.
Yeah.
So my first major thing is pray about it, make sure your heart's in the right place. My second thing is talk to your pastor or any spiritual mentor in your life. That's how my process went. I talked to my youth pastor, who was very aware of how my life was, like, the direction that my life was going. So yeah, pray about it, talk to a spiritual leader or mentor, see how they feel about it, and then evaluate some of the skills that you have that God's gifted you in and see where you can use that. I know that there's a few mission finding websites, I guess is what it's almost like job hunting websites, but for missions specifically. I know, like, Mission Next is one of them, and I know there's a few, but look for things on there related to your profession or your skill set or something like that, and maybe there's something there that the Lord could use you in. Also, look to serve in the local church. Like, you don't have to jump straight to, like, a ministry or mission or anything like that. Serve in your local church. Your local church needs you more than the missions field needs you. And that's something that, like, I know the churches that I've been in, they want to train up people who are serving in the church. And if those people who are serving in the church end up going on to serve in missions, then yay, that's amazing. But one of the things that my missions board asked me was, like, how do you serve in the church? And I think that's really important, of, like, already establishing that you're not just looking to go overseas or wherever, but you're also looking to serve in your local body, to serve the people that you're around every single week.
I think that's really good, like, mindset kind of advice too, in that, like, you know, thinking about, like, hey, you're called to ministry, you want to go into ministry, you want to maybe serve in missions overseas, but there can be sometimes a trap of, like, the future. I'm working toward the future, where it's like, what can I do today that the Lord has for me today? And maybe that's right there in your local church.
Exactly.
Maybe that's how the Lord's going to prepare you for a mission field. That's a really good point, Breck. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Breck. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And excited to see how the Lord continues to use you.
Thanks.
And thank you for spending an hour with us right now.
Of
Thank you,
course.
Rick.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice being here.